girl, put your leg up. Like this. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Put my leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Like this. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Put my leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Like this. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Put my leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Like this. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Go ahead, girl, put your leg up. Leg up. Do it. Do it. Leg up. Do it. Do it.
Okay, welcome back to the John McKay Show here on RadioFire.com. A lot of things that we need to get into. It's been a busy last few days. So much to get into. Later on tonight, of course, we're going to be talking about the Kaepernick debacle. We're going to be talking about all of that. That is later on tonight. Now, I have a busy schedule these next few weeks. We're going to be trying to talk to every candidate that is running for office here in Baltimore. Very ambitious. I understand that. I'm a very ambitious man. So, but we're going to make that happen. Anyway, I've said this many times. This is the most important election to hit these Americas. This is it. I understand that people say that often. I'll mute that. I understand that people say that often, but I really mean that. I really mean that. This is the most important election. This election is going to showcase a crossroads. This election puts us at a point of the old guard and the new guard. Is the old guard going to relinquish control? No. The young guard is going to have to take control. If they want it and if they're ready, I don't know. We're going to find out when we talk to candidates. We've talked to a lot of candidates, and we're going to talk to more. So today I'm going to be sitting down with someone who is running for mayor. Whoa, that's important. The city's leadership has been in question for some time now, and we're gonna talk to someone who is running and get his thoughts about the city, get his thoughts about Baltimore, where we need to go, where we can go, and the such. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and let's come back with our guest. Before we do that, one of the biggest party weekends of 2019 is coming up, Thanksgiving weekend. Saturday, November the 30th, 2019, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., Radisson Hotel, downtown Baltimore. The Kenny K Old School Holiday Family Reunion Party is going to take place. So we encourage people to get tickets for that. Advance tickets, $25, available now. It's Thanksgiving weekend. It's going to be appreciation party for teachers and Parks and Recs. It's going to be an old school party throwdown. Some of the DJs, let me run that down to you. DJ Kenny K, DJ Sean Marshall, Scotty B, DJ Angelo, DJ Deke, Rod Lee, yours truly, Don McKay. I'm going to be on the 1s and 2s as well. All hosted by B More Russ and Conan. Hotel rates is at the Radisson Hotel. So hotel rates if you want to party and then stay at the hotel, $84. Text 443-509-7051. November 30th, Radisson Hotel. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back with our first guest of the evening. Back. Boom, just like that. I say it all the time, how important this election is, how important it is for people to participate in the voting process. Many people have voted. The voting is very important. If you need an example, look at who we have in the White House. Voting is important. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Please
you
introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Dante Swinton. I work for an organization called the Energy Justice Network. I'm a master's graduate in nonprofit management from the University of Baltimore, and I'm the youngest candidate running for mayor this year. So, or I guess this election cycle. So I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming. So you said that you're the youngest candidate running thus far.
Mm-hmm.
I frequently talk about this being an election between the old guard and the new guard.
Mm-hmm.
This could not be a better example of that. So let's talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
All right, so I grew up in South Carolina. I am in a very conservative part of the state, in the upstate. Went to undergrad down there, and grew up with a single parent household, so I know the struggles of a lot of the families here in Baltimore City and other cities of color and the like. So I kind of played a major role on how I've been influenced on what kind of policies I think are necessary to build up a better city and to make sure that moms and dads and guardians and what have you have better livelihoods, so that way children don't have to be out on the streets, whether it be selling water or doing the squeegeeing or anything like that. So we've been missing building up those parts of our communities for decades in this city, especially. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to get in.
So what brought you to Baltimore?
So I decided to come for a change of scenery and
This is
grad
different
school.
from South Carolina.
First, I guess, city of color that I've been raised in. Knew a lot of the background of the city, and I was happy to have been here during the uprising in 15. And
You were happy to be here doing that, right?
yes, I was. Yes.
Did you get a TV or something? What were you happy to be here?
Well, I lived in Reservoir Hill at the time.
Okay.
I was like 5 minutes away from the CVS that was on fire, but I participated in the marches and just saw that like expression of pain and frustration with the way things have been since the city hasn't really improved, especially for its black residents, for the last 50 some years. So having seen that, plus being in the programs that I was in at UB, I just felt the need to get involved. And so I've been a community organizer in the city for the past 4 years. I got a Clean Air Act passed at the city council level earlier this year that Mayor Pugh signed before everything went down. And I'm happy to see that. So it's just like I can do things before I even got in the office, and now looking to do even more if I can get in.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. So tell me this. So you said that you grew up in a conservative area in Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect your political standing now?
Well,
where do you sit? Do you left, right, center?
I'm definitely the most progressive candidate in this race, so I would say that if anything, maybe it pushed me more to be more progressive. Because my home county of Greenville is like one of the poorest counties or one of the counties that's the least likely to have folks that are growing up poor to escape poverty. Mm-hmm. And so a minimum of $4,000 a year, typically fewer are made by folks that grew up poor in that county. And so, despite it being one of the wealthiest in the state. So, knowing that
we have similar problems,
right? Exactly. So knowing like that is a very pervasive thing, poverty and social injustice, and it's just heightened. I think, if anything, in Baltimore, it's kind of impacted the way I want to see the city improve and actually deal with root causes of problems, as opposed to band-aids like we've been doing.
Yep. So your slogan is "A new way, a new day for Baltimore." Mm-hmm. Ready.
Yep.
Please explain to our listeners what that means to you.
Absolutely. So. I think that a lot of folks, when we talk about the city, we think like, Democrats have failed the city, and they have. It's been a one-party city. But for me, it's not so much about the party so much as it is the policy. Like, we've chosen policies that have not benefited the majority community in the city. We've stuck our investments into very narrow sections, and we've seen all these other communities left behind. So if we're going to move into a new day in a new way, we have to think outside the box. We have to go against the grain of what we've been doing and actually build a better Baltimore. And so one of the primary things there is tackling the issue of crime, but not in the way that we've consistently done it, which is to continue increasing the funding for our police department.
Okay.
So that's just one component, but a major component nevertheless.
Yeah. So you say that you have real plans to address these, some of these problems that you've outlined, and of course Baltimore has many, and you say that it's time to turn away from the corrupt politicians and elect someone who cares about the city.
Yep.
What specifically would you change about Baltimore if you became mayor?
Absolutely. So one of the primary things, and I got a number of them, but to focus on the crime aspect, I think what we've been doing, as I said, is just putting Band-Aids on everything.
Right.
And the way that our biggest Band-Aid is just police something. And so, and for example, in 2017, we spent $480 million on policing. And that was more per capita than any city in this country of any size. That's more than New York, more than Chicago.
Right. Crazy.
And yet we still had one of our several years of 300 plus murders. And now we've already passed that again here, and we're probably due to pass it again next year. And obviously, like when you see that plus the $500 million we spent last year, and now the $530 million we budgeted this year, over the last 4 years we budgeted $2 billion for policing in this city, and yet we still have some 300 plus homicides, hundreds of non-fatal shootings, robberies, etc. So if we're not actually tackling the fact that crime is due to desperation, due to lack of resources, due to lack of engagement with communities, then we're never going to change it. Like, you could have all the implementations of Commissioner Harrison's plan, or even some of the ridiculous ideas that Governor Hogan has about dealing with crime in the city, but you're not going to get rid of it if you don't actually deal with the root causes. So what I want to do is make sure that we actually invest that money into communities to create affordable housing, to provide small business grants, to revamp the city's tree canopy, so that way we can deal with the heat island effect that a lot of these majority black communities deal with. And the thing is, when it comes to climate change, we're in a climate crisis. Like, we're due to have a climate like anywhere from Nashville, Tennessee to Cleveland, Mississippi by 2050. And so obviously it's going to be more hot, more humid, and you can see across the board that violence is increased during the summer months because people are more irritable, they can't stay inside because they don't have air conditioning, and it just leads to greater tension. So if we're not even tackling something as simple as cooling our city down, on top of actually providing resources to these communities, we're not going to see anything different. If anything, it's just going to get worse. So that's what I want to push back on, among other components, such as creating actual jobs in the city and, like I said, affordable housing. So.
What are your thoughts on transparency and accountability in politicians?
Oh, no, I totally am with that. I mean, one of the things that I propose is to minimize dramatically the level of money individual and corporations can provide. Right now, I think there's a bill that Christopher Burnett put forward to limit the contributions to like $200. I wouldn't be opposed to even dropping it down to $150 per person per corporation. But I believe that even in Baltimore, and just any city, we have so many leaders that will kowtow to corporate interests faster than they will representatives, or rather than their constituents. Yeah. So if we're going to be straightforward about that, we've got to make sure that that money's diminished, and that meetings that are held by the mayor and by any person on their staff have a transcript, maybe have a video in there. Don't have any of these like closed door type of sessions that could end up with massive tax cuts that end up harming the communities for decades on. And that's the kind of transparency I want to bring. I want to make sure people know who I'm meeting with, who's getting to come to the mayor's office, who's having these conversations, what proposals have been given to me, and I don't want to take any corporate PAC money or anything like that. I want to make sure that this is an accountable government, which on top of that, I want to instill a participatory budgeting policy, which would increase the level of accountability with our public money, which we currently don't have. And so I think that would be a very significant change to the way we do things here.
Absolutely, that would be different. Mm-hmm. So let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
In the spring of this year, mm-hmm. Baltimore's computer systems were compromised. Mm-hmm. There was a ransomware attack, and the hackers, mm-hmm. they wanted $76K.
Yeah.
If you had been mayor, mm-hmm. would you have paid the money?
I think at this point I would have been much more open to paying it than I would have to realize we had an $18 million hole to fix everything. I mean, it's clear that we already had infrastructure that was super outdated. And there was a city in Florida that said they went on ahead and paid that ransom because they saw what happened in Baltimore. They saw what happened in other communities that had this ransomware. And yeah, it's not good to be like, oh, we'll just bend to these hackers or whatever. But that was another proof of the fact that we just had not installed updated tech for our city, and we obviously have still issues with water billing, with all this other stuff. So I mean, it was just another example of why we need to be more forward thinking in the way that we handle stuff in Baltimore City. And when you look at $76,000 versus the 18+ million that it's going to end up costing us to get everything back together, I mean, it just doesn't make sense for us to have lost that kind of money, and realizing that we just weren't ready for something like that.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. When we talk about the city, and we talk about the police department and the different challenges that we have with the police department, there was a case that happened 2 years ago, almost to the day, where Detective Sean Suter lost his life.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the Sean Suter case?
I think that there should not have been a comment that, this case is closed, like there had been recently. I mean, it was clear that all these intersections of the Gun Trace Task Force, why Suter was out there the day that he did die, and just not knowing everything that happened. I mean, I think we've got to get down to the bottom of these cases faster, and rather than like saying, oh, no, your case closed, this, that, and the other. I mean, it seems like that's a go-to for a lot of municipalities, just like, if something goes down, maybe we cover it for a little bit, but then we're like, all right, everything's done, but they don't get the whole story. So that's like a Sandra Bland situation, or the gentleman who testified for Botham John in Texas and then ended up getting killed shortly after that case came down and the police officer was found guilty. Like, they're just like, it's probably some drug-related thing. Like, no, like, we've got to be able to understand what happened and to be able to use those lessons to move forward. And so I'm with the state's attorney's office and saying that we need to continue to dive into this and make sure we know everything before we conclude anything.
Okay. We talked about crime, and there have been a lot of people to throw a lot of different things out there. There has been talk of a surveillance plane, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that a surveillance plane would help the city combat crime?
Absolutely not. I am not a fan of this. I stand on the side of the ACLU in this regard. I think that that's just, even though there's been an offer by the company to pay for a part of it or what have you, I don't like that. There's no need for that. It's still, again, another Band-Aid to this giant political machine, or I guess government machine of police enforcement of everything. I think, again, if you are wanting to deal with crime and minimize the number of homicides, minimize the number of burglaries and the like, you have to deal with the root causes. So if you're going to have someone who's dealing drugs because they have to, that's the way that they can make money at this point in their lives, and then you jail them for 10 years, and then they come out, mind you, spend like $40-something thousand per bed for any prisoner we have. So let's say $400,000 after 10 years. Now they're out. Now they've got a record. And now, what are they going to do with that record? Now, there's some businesses and companies that provide returning citizens jobs, but not everybody does.
Definitely.
So what did we prove over those 10 years? We just kicked the can down the road. So if you actually engage community members and provide jobs, and for example, for me, I want to install a ZeroWaste Economy, create 4,000 jobs in the city, create a clean energy economy, create even more jobs, and expand small businesses that are within all of our communities right now. So that way people can walk to work and just continue hiring on and building wealth in these communities. Like that, a job and the resources around your mental health, your food access, all of that is what diminishes crime, not continuing to police. Because if that were the case, then $2 billion should have been able to solve this problem by this point. That's a lot of money just to go into to diminish crime, and yet it doesn't seem like it's done anything. So why would we continue to do the same approach over and over and over again if Baltimore continues to have the same number of homicides, robberies, and the like? So we've got to avoid these surveillance components. We've got to actually invest in these communities, because it's a whole kind of broken windows thing. If you actually revitalize these homes and put folks in them that need affordable housing, then now there's another community, or a stronger community there, that's now going to be more accountable and preventing anything happening in their community. And you keep doing that, so on and so forth, to the point where that crime gets eliminated because people have those resources. But we're not doing that. We're selectively choosing communities, as Dr. Brown calls it, in the white L, more so than the black butterfly of the city. And and for 50 years, you've seen what happens with that. And so people think that the best way to do it is just run people into the ground with policing and jail everybody. But obviously that hasn't helped. So got to do it differently.
That's true. And we do need a different approach. So some of your responses may lead some people to think that you're anti-police because you've come down pretty hard on policing. Do you think that you would be better served in a policy position, or because you need to work closely with the police?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think that's always the perception. Like you want to move money out of the police budget. Oh my God, you're fine with crime. Like I get that perception, but the question is again, $2 billion over 4 years, and yet what is the top thing people complain about? Crime. So are we now saying, oh, it should have been $4 billion over 4 years? It should have been $8 billion. Like, what is that amount?
But it's like you said,
right.
The direct crime is a direct result of what? It's not of lack of police.
Right.
That's not what it is.
Exactly.
So tell me this: the police commissioner has not been in his job long. He's been here a few months. Would you, if you became mayor, would you keep him in office or would you change him out?
So I would be willing to engage with him on his crime plan. I think that generally Commissioner Harrison has indicated some things that I support, like realizing that there's more than just arresting folks. Of course, that those components of the crime plan have to be implemented by other city agencies because the police, that's not what they're equipped for. But if the idea is to hire another 200-something officers that we claim as a deficit, and the number of staff that we have,
that is part of his plan.
Right, exactly. I disagree with that component. I think that also runs under this assumption that we aren't going to deal with the actual root causes, and therefore we need more cops to be able to deal with these things that we haven't actually tackled in a different direction. So I think police definitely play a role in our city. They certainly do play a role in safety, but they can't play the only role. And I think that that's where I disagree with the way that the city's handled this for the last several years, is that they put policing at the top. Never mind that if they had provided some of these folks jobs and mental health facilities and access to be able to deal with addictions, to be able to feed their families, then that would have removed any need to be in such a desperate state that you end up committing these crimes. Crimes are more, again, as of desperation. They're not because, everyone's like inherently criminal or whatever. It's because we've set this up in a way where there are so few resources, people turn in on themselves, and then you just see what we have in Baltimore for the last several decades.
So you say that you are Baltimore's most progressive candidate. And why is that?
All right. So
what makes you that?
Absolutely. So I think that when it comes to dealing with the city's issues, we have to deal with the root causes, but we also have to think outside the box. So one of the things that I work on in my main job is fighting for a zero-waste economy in this city. As I mentioned, we got a bill passed earlier this year that my boss wrote called the Baltimore Clean Air Act, and it set out to shut down the city's largest air polluter, its trash incinerator, and the nation's largest medical waste incinerator. So that's in Baltimore, too. We get stuff from 20 different states and DC and Canada to go to that one spot. And then you got our trash incinerator gets stuff from 6 counties and 8 states every year. So we're a dumping ground for a lot of places. So being the progressive-minded person that I am, I realize the potential of actually dealing with our recyclables and trash in a much more sustainable way. So instead of having what is the city's largest air polluter and puts out at least 300 pounds of lead every year, we build the facilities that are for recycling, that are for composting, that are for reuse. We provide business grants for folks to recycle mattresses, to recycle glass. And this can create 4,000 jobs in the city. And those are jobs that don't require a high school diploma or at minimum that. Considering how many folks only like a quarter of the folks have a bachelor's degree in the city. So we need green collar jobs to replace the blue collar ones we've lost over the last 50 years. So that's one component. But also, making sure that we engage and embrace all of our communities. So the LGBTQ community, we definitely need to make sure that we engage in that regard. We need to.
You feel like they're not being engaged?
Right, absolutely, and like we have a commission, but like there's still a big issue of Black trans women being killed in the city. And we still have a very, very high teen pregnancy rate. It's 3 times the national average. Even though there has been progress in that regard, there's a program that Colorado implemented that gave out free IUDs and access to birth control for their high school students, and their teen pregnancy rate dropped 60%. So, and we've seen, and there's just study after study after study, like if you become a parent in your teenage years, you're going to have a very difficult time being able to escape poverty. And we have a lot of cycles of poverty in the city. So being able to break that cycle of poverty by engaging and having more comprehensive sex ed, having the ZeroWaste Economy, actually providing jobs and providing affordable housing for folks that's really affordable housing. So part of my plan includes building 100 homes in every community for folks that make $14,000 to $32,000 a year, and providing rental subsidies and utility subsidies for that, but also implementing more green space for these communities, implementing a cooperative grocery store, putting funding toward that so that way we can end food deserts in the city and not have to depend on the big box stores and everything. Yeah, and also, like I said, dealing with the climate crisis, engaging the homeless, actually homing the homeless. That is the cheapest way that the city could handle its homelessness population, and yet we're not really doing it. And so engaging in that regard, I feel like makes me the most progressive candidate for sure, because there are just so many
very
components.
progressive, very progressive ideas. What kind of response have you been getting from people when you tell them that you're running for mayor?
Yeah, so I think people, some ask, do you really want to get into that? Because, it is a fascinating experience to try to lead this city, and knowing that there's just been so many levels of corruption and resignations here and there and backroom deals and all this stuff. But also I think a lot of people realize that, as you mentioned at the start, just old guard versus new guard type of thing. Like, are we going to maintain what has kept us in this space for the last 10, 20 years plus, right, or are we going to do something different? And I think a lot of people are ready for something different. And again, as the youngest candidate, as the most progressive one, all my ideas are very comprehensive, very intersectional. They realize that all of these pieces have to be in place to make sure the city is better, that I don't leave anyone behind. Right. And so I think people are excited about the fact that there actually is someone that's thinking in that intersectional type of way and willing to do the tough things, because I think a lot of politicians are going to be wary of saying, oh, we need to cut the police budget, because they think it's counterintuitive to dealing with crime, but it isn't. And so I think people are ready for something new, and as long as people hear that there are options out there and they see my ideas and hear me speak about them, I think I got a good shot at it.
Give me a shot. Yeah. How can people support your campaign?
All right. Well, yeah, so they could go to dcsforbemore.org. That's DCS the number 4, bemore.org. I've got all my policies on there, videos. I also got a YouTube page, Dante Swinton for Be More, Twitter at Dante Swinton, and Facebook, Dante Swinton for Baltimore City Mayor. There's a donate component on the website. I'm always happy to get more ideas that folks have. Like, all my pieces of my platform are from me and from suggestions from folks that are in the activist realm in this city to make sure that we actually do hit all these components that haven't actually been tackled by legislators and by the mayor over the last several decades. So so there are a lot of opportunities. I also could use a lot of volunteers to do some door knocking and just get those policies out there, that there is an option beyond the top 2 perceived front runners in this race. Because I think a lot of people posted on Nextdoor the list of folks that were running. Most of the folks on Nextdoor didn't realize that all these other people were running. So got to get involved and,
absolutely,
and share that knowledge.
They're definitely more than 2 people running. Mm-hmm. definitely more. I want to thank you for coming through and speaking with me. I really appreciate your time, and much success to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to take a break, and I'll be back more after this.